Mexico will continue its measures to stop migrants from reaching its northern border with the United States, its top diplomat said Friday, days after Donald Trump won the U.S. presidential election, vowing a new crackdown on illegal immigration. Foreign Minister Juan Ramón de la Fuente stressed that Mexico's model is working and will stay in place, pointing to data that shows the number of migrants caught by U.S. authorities at the border had fallen 76% since last December. The United Nations has been planning for the possible return of Donald Trump and the cuts to U.S. funding and engagement with world body that are likely to come with his second term as president. There was a sense of déjà vu and some trepidation at the 193-member world body, said one senior Asian diplomat, as Republican Trump won Tuesday's U.S. election over Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris. A Qantas Airways plane bound for Brisbane suffered an engine failure after takeoff on Friday and circled for a short period of time before returning safely to Sydney Airport, the Australian airline said. Passengers heard a loud bang from one of the aircraft's two engines, Australian media reported. Spain has registered the rainiest October on record, culminating in the most deadly floods in decades in the country, the National Weather Agency EMET said on Friday. More than 220 people died after torrential rains on October 29 caused flash floods that surged through suburbs south of the city of Valencia, in eastern Spain, sweeping away cars and bridges and flooding properties and underground car parks. Amsterdam banned demonstrations for 3 days from Friday after overnight attacks on Israeli soccer supporters by what the mayor called anti-Semitic hit-and-run squads, and Israel said it would fly many fans home. Mayor Femke Halsema said Maccabi fans had been attacked, abused and pelted with fireworks around the city, and that riot police intervened to protect them and escort them to hotels. At least 5 people were treated in hospital. The world was hit by so many floods and landslides in 2024 that it triggered the aid sector's first multi-disaster insurance payout, the Red Cross told Reuters, signaling both the scale of the problem and the need for new financing solutions. The Israeli military said on Friday it was planning to reopen the Kisufim crossing into central Gaza to increase the flow of aid into the southern end of the Gaza Strip. The move comes amid growing international pressure on Israel to get more aid into Gaza, where aid agencies have warned of a gathering humanitarian crisis in the north of the enclave, where Israeli troops have been conducting a major operation for more than a month. Dutch far-right leader Geert Wilders will meet Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar and Parliamentary Speaker Amir Ohana at Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport on Friday following attacks on Israeli soccer supporters in the city, Dutch news agency ANP reported. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appointed U.S.-born Yehiel Leiter, an official who previously served as chief of staff in the finance ministry, as the next Israeli ambassador to the United States. Yehiel Leiter is a highly capable diplomat, an eloquent speaker, and possesses a deep understanding of American culture and politics, Netanyahu said in a statement. 2 survivors of a bombing that killed 22 people at the close of an Ariana Grande concert 7 years ago were on Friday awarded £45,000, $58,212, in damages after successfully suing a conspiracy theorist who claimed the attack was staged. Poland signed a 1.3 billion zloty, $323.19 million, contract to purchase domestically produced accompanying vehicles for WR-40 Langusta multiple rocket launchers, Defense Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz said on Friday. The move is part of Poland's ongoing effort to strengthen its military capabilities in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. President Vladimir Putin is ready to discuss Ukraine with Donald Trump, but that does not mean he is willing to alter Moscow's demands, the Kremlin said on Friday. The head of Human Rights Watch, HRW, said on Friday that states supplying weapons to Israel as it pursues conflicts in Gaza and Lebanon, despite evidence of violations of international law, are empowering belligerents elsewhere. The premiere of a 19th-century play directed by John Malkovich was performed in an almost empty Sofia National Theater after angry protesters irritated with the way Bulgarians are portrayed prevented visitors from entering the building. 1 hour before the opening of George Bernard Shaw's Arms and the Man on Thursday evening, protesters started gathering in front of the theater, Nova TV reported on its website. Irish Prime Minister Simon Harris on Friday announced the formal start of the country's general election campaign, hoping to retain his coalition's lead in polls and to capitalize on a slide in support for the opposition Sinn Féin. South Korea President Yoon Suk-yeol said the country was prepared in its alliance with the United States to strike back if North Korea attempted a nuclear attack against it, Newsweek reported on Friday. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi strongly backed his government's contentious 2019 decision to revoke the partial autonomy of Jammu and Kashmir, days after the territory's newly elected lawmakers sought its restoration. Only the Constitution of Babasaheb Ambedkar will operate in Kashmir. No power in the world can restore Article 300's partial autonomy in Kashmir, Modi said, referring to one of the founding fathers of the Indian Constitution. Hezbollah welcomes any effort to stop the war in Lebanon but does not pin hopes for a ceasefire on any particular U.S. administration, Hezbollah lawmaker Ibrahim al-Musawi said on Thursday when asked about Donald Trump's election victory. Britain on Friday named Jonathan Powell, who was chief of staff to former Prime Minister Tony Blair, as its national security advisor, a role that will involve responding to global threats and building ties with Donald Trump's new U.S. administration. Greece and Turkey still disagree on the extent of issues needing to be tackled over the designation of their maritime boundaries, but talks will continue, the Greek and Turkish foreign ministers said after meeting on Friday. The European Union needs to rethink its support for Ukraine following Donald Trump's U.S. election victory, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban said before a summit of EU leaders on Friday, adding that Europe cannot finance the war alone. War in Ukraine could end easily if the U.S. administration under Donald Trump takes a solution-based approach, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan was quoted as saying on Friday. Germany's main opposition leader, Friedrich Merz, criticized Chancellor Olaf Scholz on Friday as irresponsible for delaying early elections, as an opinion poll also showed voters in favor of an early vote to pull the country out of political crisis. Mozambique's largest hospital said on Friday that at least 3 people were killed and 66 injured during clashes between police and protesters the previous day over a disputed election. The fatalities add to at least 18 people killed in earlier protests since the October 9th poll, which the opposition claims was rigged. Some groups have given a higher toll, with Mozambique's Center for Democracy and Human Rights reporting 34 deaths overall. Nigeria's Human Rights Commission said on Friday an investigation had found no evidence that the Nigerian military had deliberately attacked women and children or carried out secret abortions in its fight against an Islamist insurgency in the northeast. Indonesia's Mount Lutobai Laki-Laki erupted several times on Friday, belching volcanic ash that rose up to 10 kilometers, 32,800 feet, into the sky, officials said, following a big eruption on Sunday night that killed 9 people. The eruption on the island of Flores in the province of East Nusa Tenggara has damaged more than 2,000 houses and caused thousands to evacuate. The EU must focus on setting its own house in order, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said on Friday, citing tariffs, competitiveness and defense as the most pressing issues the bloc faces as it comes to terms with Donald Trump's election win. Trump's return to power poses a major challenge for the European Union as its leaders meet in Budapest amid uncertainty in a continent that is struggling to find unity, with two of its biggest powers, Germany and France, politically weakened. The UN Human Rights Office said on Friday nearly 70% of the fatalities it has verified in the Gaza war were women and children, and condemned what it called a systematic violation of the fundamental principles of international humanitarian law. President Tayyip Erdogan sought to reset Turkey's strained ties with the United States by inviting President-elect Donald Trump to visit, and said Trump spoke very positively about Turkey during a phone call. Trump's election victory this week was generally met with cheer in NATO member Turkey, with markets rallying and some officials cautiously optimistic about prospects for new U.S. economic policies. Lithuania's Social Democrats, who won last month's parliamentary election, said on Friday they had decided to include in a new coalition government a populist party whose leader is standing trial for alleged anti-Semitic statements. Canadian police and migrant aid groups are bracing for an influx of asylum seekers fleeing President-elect Donald Trump's United States at the same time Canada deals with record numbers of refugee claimants and is trying to bring in fewer immigrants. France has stepped up its bird flu risk assessment to high from moderate, it said on Friday in a decree that will trigger reinforced security measures around poultry farms. Highly pathogenic avian influenza, commonly called bird flu, has been spreading faster among poultry in the European Union this season than in 2023, raising concerns of a repeat of previous crises that led to poultry deaths in the tens of millions and fears it could lead to human-to-human transmission. Pakistan's Punjab banned entry to many public spaces from Friday, including parks and zoos, as it sought to protect people from severe air pollution in parts of the eastern province. The provincial capital Lahore has been engulfed in a thick, smoky haze this week and was consistently rated the world's most polluted city by Swiss group IQ Air in its live rankings, prompting the closure of schools and work-from-home mandates. Taiwan has set up a war room to watch the live stream from next week's COP29 climate summit, given it is not allowed to attend for political reasons, Environment Minister Peng Chai-ming said on Friday. Democratically governed Taiwan is excluded from almost all international bodies due to objections from China, which views the island as its own territory, not a country, and claims the right to be able to speak for it on the international stage, a position that infuriates the government in Taipei. German Economy Minister Robert Habeck will announce his intention on Friday to run for the post of Chancellor on behalf of the Greens, a source familiar with the matter said, days after the collapse of the country's three-way coalition. The breakup of Germany's coalition following months of infighting over budget and fiscal policy has paved the way for an early election, with Chancellor Olaf Scholz, a Social Democrat, aiming for a vote in March. Thailand plans to increase the daily minimum wage to 400 baht, $11.76, next year, Labor Minister Pipat Ratchakitprakarn said on Friday. Despite the violence directed at Israeli soccer fans in Amsterdam, France won't change its plans to host a Nations League game against Israel next week, the Interior Minister said on Friday. France is not backing down because that would amount to giving up in the face of threats of violence and anti-Semitism. Interior Minister Bruno Retailleau said in a post on X. Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan said on Friday that he hoped U.S. President-elect Donald Trump will tell Israel to stop its war efforts, suggesting a good start would be halting U.S. arms support to Israel. Trump has made promises to end conflicts. We want that promise to be fulfilled and for Israel to be told to stop, Erdogan told reporters on a return flight from Budapest, according to an official readout. World food prices rose in October to an 18-month high as vegetable oils led increases seen in most food staples, United Nations data showed on Friday. Price index compiled by the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, to track the most globally traded food commodities increased to 127.4 points last month, up 2% from a revised 124.9 points in September. China summoned the Philippines' ambassador on Friday to express its objection to two new laws in the Southeast Asian nation asserting maritime rights and sovereignty over disputed areas of the South China Sea, its foreign ministry said. China made solemn representations to the ambassador shortly after Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. signed the Maritime Zones Act and the Archipelagic Sea Lanes Act into law to strengthen his country's maritime claims and bolster its territorial integrity. Russian President Vladimir Putin described China on Thursday as Russia's ally and threw his weight behind Beijing's claims over Taiwan, while stating that no countries had anything to fear from deepening Sino-Russian cooperation. The two countries have not declared a formal military alliance, but Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping signed a no-limits partnership deal in 2022, less than 3 weeks before Putin sent his troops into Ukraine. Myanmar's war-ravaged Rakhine state could face imminent famine according to a United Nations report, which estimates that more than 2 million people could be at the risk of starvation. Rice production in Rakhine, a western state that borders Bangladesh, has declined due to shortages of seeds and fertilizers, severe weather, and the displacement of people who can no longer farm, according to the United Nations Development Program, UNDP. Companies have been moving factories from China to Southeast Asia, anticipating Donald Trump would slap high tariffs on Beijing if he regained the White House, a move set to accelerate with his election win, industrial park developers in the region say. Trump, who won a resounding victory on Tuesday, has threatened 60% tariffs on goods coming into the U.S. from China, much higher than the levies of 7.5% to 25% he imposed in his first term, a major risk for the world's second-largest economy. China's Vice Premier, Ding Xuexiang, will travel to Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, to attend the COP29 climate summit next week, a foreign ministry spokesperson said on Friday. The meeting will focus on the issue of climate finance, with nearly 200 countries aiming to thrash out details of a new global fund to help developing countries tackle global warming. A Malaysian court on Friday ordered former Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin to pay more than $300,000 to another politician in a defamation case, adding to the opposition leader's legal troubles. Muhyiddin, who was premier for 17 months between 2020 and 2021, is also charged with sedition for allegedly insulting a former king and is accused of corruption and money laundering in separate cases. He denies wrongdoing. Republican President-elect Donald Trump is poised to build on his legacy of reshaping the federal judiciary with nominees who his allies and opponents predict could be even more conservative than the near-record 234 judges he put on the bench in his first stint in office. With Republicans set to take back control of the Senate, which must confirm judicial nominees, Trump should enjoy an easy path to filling possible vacancies on the U.S. Supreme Court and the expected 100-plus seats that will likely open up on lower courts across the nation. The Philippines ordered evacuations, stockpiled food, and put soldiers on standby in preparation for Typhoon Yingxing, officials said on Tuesday, as the storm barrels towards northeastern towns where it could make landfall this week. The storm center of the typhoon, packing winds of 120 kilometers per hour, 75 miles per hour, was estimated to be 590 kilometers, 367 miles, from the eastern town of Baylor in the province of Aurora, state weather agency POG-ASA said. President-elect Donald Trump on Thursday announced that Susie Wiles, one of his two campaign managers, will be his White House chief of staff, entrusting a top position to a political operative who helped the Republican win election. The appointment was the first of what is expected to be a flurry of staffing announcements as Trump girds for a return to the White House on January 20th. 2 people have died and 12 are missing after a fishing boat sank on Friday in waters off South Korea's southern resort island of Jeju, officials said. Another boat nearby raised the alarm after reporting the 129-ton ship was going under at around 4:30 a.m., 1930 GMT on Thursday, prompting authorities to launch a rescue operation, said Chung Moo-won, a Jeju Coast Guard official. Cuban authorities said they had begun restoring power to the eastern half of the island on Thursday, a day after Hurricane Rafael knocked out the country's electrical grid, leaving 10 million people in the dark. The grid collapsed on Wednesday as Rafael tore across Cuba with top winds of more than 115 miles per hour, 185 kilometers per hour, damaging homes, uprooting trees, and toppling telephone poles. An Italian Navy ship carrying a small group of migrants docked in an Albanian port on Friday in an attempt by Rome to salvage a plan to process asylum seekers abroad after a first attempt hit legal hurdles. Dr. Philip Moreira's commute to hospital on an electric bicycle is a dangerous, smog-infused weave through the chaotic traffic of Senegal's capital, Dakar. Moreira, 58, is part of a small but budding community of urban cyclists that have become a more common sight in recent years, zipping around Dakar's gridlock for exercise and fun, signaling a shift in the city's transport dynamics. There are no winners in tariff or trade wars, nor in wars over science and technology or industry, said China's top envoy to the United States, as Donald Trump's presidential election win raised the specter of another bruising confrontation with China. Xi Feng, China's ambassador to the United States, said differences between the two nations should be the driving force for exchanges and mutual learning rather than an excuse for rejection and confrontation, and that the successes of each were opportunities for the other. As U.S. election exit polls began to point to a second presidency for Donald Trump, many Americans were already looking for another kind of exit, moving abroad. Google searches for a move to Canada surged 1,270% in the 24 hours after U.S. East Coast polls closed on Tuesday, company data shows. Similar searches about moving to New Zealand climbed nearly 2,000%, while those for Australia jumped 820%. A political crisis at home threatens further pain for Germany's car, banking, and energy industries as they grapple with an increasingly hostile world following the election of Donald Trump and trade tensions with China. Germany is bracing for months of uncertainty after its governing three-party coalition crumbled following a series of disputes, most recently on how to jumpstart its flagging economy, Europe's biggest. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's economic and policies could further weaken the yen's value against the U.S. dollar, the head of an opposition party that Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba needs to stay in power said on Friday. The potential increase in tariffs or tax cuts could lead to inflation in the U.S. and therefore higher interest rates, Yuichiro Tamaki, leader of the Democratic Party for the People, DPP, said at a press conference on Friday. This year's UN Climate Conference in Baku, Azerbaijan, marks the world's 29th leadership gathering to confront global warming since the first Conference of the Parties in 1995. After Donald Trump first stormed the White House 8 years ago, rattled Chinese leaders responded to his tariffs and fiery rhetoric with force, resulting in a trade war that plunged ties between the globe's largest economies to multi-year lows. This time around, Beijing has been preparing for Trump's return by deepening ties with allies, boosting self-reliance in tech, and setting aside money to prop up the economy that is now more vulnerable to fresh tariffs already threatened by Trump. Indonesia's new leader Prabowo Subianto set off for China on Friday for his first international trip as president, kicking off a tour that will include stops in the United States, Britain, and South America for the APEC and G20 summits. Prabowo, who won the presidency in February at his third attempt, has signaled he is keen to play an active role on the international stage, demonstrated by his visits to 21 countries during the time he was president-elect. India's three-decade ban on importing author Salman Rushdie's controversial The Satanic Verses book has effectively been lifted after a court said the government was unable to produce the original notification that imposed the ban. The India-born British author's novel was banned by India in 1988 after some Muslims viewed it as blasphemous. The Delhi High Court was hearing a 2019 case challenging the import ban of the book in India. An Israeli strike on the southern Lebanese city of Sidon killed 3 Lebanese citizens and wounded 3 Lebanese soldiers, the Lebanese army said on Thursday, and the Malaysian government said 6 of its personnel with UNIFIL forces had been injured. The strike targeted a car while it was passing a checkpoint, killing 3 Lebanese who were inside the vehicle, the army said in a statement. Taiwan's Coast Guard said on Friday it would offer rewards worth thousands of dollars for spotting Chinese activity at sea, including warships or submarines, saying it was harnessing people power to boost its own limited workforce. Over 10,000 people were ordered to evacuate from a wildfire northwest of Los Angeles as fierce seasonal winds blew flames into ranches and neighborhoods, destroying dozens of homes, authorities said on Thursday. Firefighters and police cleared residents from neighborhoods near Camarillo before homes were set ablaze by embers blown 2 miles, 3.2 kilometers from the fire front, Ventura County Fire Department Captain Tony McHale said. The number of people aged over 100 in Italy has increased by 30% over the past 10 years, while birth rates have continued to decline. There were more than 22,000 Italians in the age bracket between 100 and 104 in 2024, up from just over 17,000 in 2014, according to a report by National Statistics Bureau Istat on Thursday. The vast majority of them, minus 81%, are women. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Thursday congratulated Donald Trump on winning the U.S. election, praised him for showing courage when a gunman tried to assassinate him, and said Moscow was ready for dialogue with the Republican president-elect. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said on Friday his government would introduce this month the legislation to ban social media for children under 16 years. Australia is trialling an age verification system to assist in blocking children from accessing social media platforms, as part of a range of measures that include some of the toughest controls imposed by any country to date. Masked men attacked 2 students who were demonstrating in support of Israel at Chicago's DePaul University on Wednesday, resulting in minor injuries and raising concern about potential anti-Semitism on the Catholic campus. The university said it was working with Chicago police to determine if the assault was a hate crime. China's new J-35A stealth fighter jet will be displayed for the first time next week at the country's biggest civil and military air show, a biennial event where Beijing showcases its expanding aerospace industry. The 6-day China International Aviation and Aerospace Exhibition begins on Tuesday in the southern Greater Bay City of Zhuhai. The 2022 edition of the event led to about $40 billion in cooperation agreements being signed, according to its organizers. A caravan of thousands of migrants traveling through Mexico with the hope of reaching the U.S. had shrunk to about half its original size on Thursday, as many migrants grapple with their prospects following former U.S. President Donald Trump's victory in Tuesday's election. Prince William said the past year had probably been the hardest of his life after a difficult period for Britain's royal family in which both his father King Charles and wife Kate were diagnosed with cancer. Speaking to British media at the end of a visit to South Africa, the heir to the throne reflected on how he was coping while balancing his duties as a royal with family time, the BBC and other publications reported on Thursday. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said on Thursday he still believed he should be the one to decide the fate of plea deals for the man accused of masterminding the September 11th attacks and two accomplices held at the U.S. military prison at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Members of U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's transition team reached out to a leading Nicaraguan opposition figure on Thursday, saying they want to unite exiled communities from Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela, the opposition figure said. Nigeria's Human Rights Commission will on Friday deliver its findings from an investigation into Reuters reports, which found the military ran a secret, systematic, and illegal abortion program and massacred children in its fight against Islamist insurgents in the Northeast. France accused Israel on Thursday of harming bilateral ties after Israeli security forces entered a holy site under French administration in Jerusalem and briefly detained two French officials with diplomatic status. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said on Thursday that Israel had made some progress in getting assistance into Gaza, but more needed to be done. The U.S. told Israel in a letter last month it must take steps in the next month to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza or face potential restrictions on U.S. military aid. The Biden administration will make a final push for elusive deals to end the wars in Gaza and Lebanon, but Donald Trump's election may leave Washington without enough leverage to bend Israel and other regional players to its will before he becomes president. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin told troops in a memo released on Thursday that the Pentagon was committed to an orderly transition to the incoming administration of Donald Trump, and that the military would not get involved in politics and was ready to carry out all lawful orders. Israeli forces stepped up bombardment across the Gaza Strip on Thursday and ordered more evacuations, creating a fresh wave of displacement from northern Gaza, to which Palestinians fear they will not be able to return. Russia plans to significantly tighten the rules governing the income received by those deemed foreign agents and of those who speak negatively about Russia after leaving the country, the Speaker of the Russian Parliament said on Thursday. President Vladimir Putin said on Thursday that Ukraine should remain neutral for there to be a chance for peace, adding that the borders of Ukraine should be in accordance with the wishes of the people living in Russian-claimed territory. Americans see immigration as the most pressing issue for President-elect Donald Trump to address, and a large majority believe he will order mass deportations of people living in the U.S. illegally, a Reuters/Ipsos poll that closed Thursday found. But respondents to the two-day poll, conducted in the hours after the Republican clinched his election victory, were divided about his plans to expel large numbers of people. President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Thursday he was not aware of any details of U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's plan to end the Ukraine war quickly, and he was convinced a rapid end would entail major concessions for Kyiv. President Vladimir Putin suggested on Thursday that Russia could hold military drills with North Korea. "We'll see. We could also conduct exercises. Why not?" Putin said, when asked whether Moscow would conduct joint military drills with Pyongyang. Brazil's government denied on Thursday a report by CNN Brazil saying its highly anticipated package to rein in mandatory expenses would involve cuts of up to just 15 billion reais, $2.6 billion, an amount the market views as insufficient. CNN Brazil reported that President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva was reviewing two spending cut proposals, one for 10 billion reais and another for 15 billion reais, the latest aimed at the health and transportation sectors. Argentina's Libertarian President Javier Milei will meet with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump and tycoon Elon Musk next week in the United States, a government spokesperson said on Thursday. The meeting with Trump will take place at Mar-a-Lago, the incoming U.S. leader's private South Florida club, according to the spokesperson. Authorities in Guerrero, one of Mexico's most violent states, said Thursday they found the remains of 11 people in the capital Chilpancingo, marking what appears to be another grisly homicide weeks after the city's mayor was murdered and decapitated. U.S. President Joe Biden urged Americans to bring down the temperature on Thursday following Republican Donald Trump's election victory, and sought to console fellow Democrats who were alarmed by the former president's stunning comeback. European leaders gathered on Thursday in the shadow of Donald Trump's election victory and said they agreed on the need to take more responsibility for their security and rely less on the United States. Trump's re-election is a major challenge for Europe, opening an era of huge uncertainty at a time when the continent is struggling to find unity, and its two biggest powers, Germany, whose government just fell apart, and France, are weakened.